Welcome in everyone to GDT Live, and we are back. I am back from Toronto, and we are back here, back with some shows. I said that like 3 times already, so that's not good. But yeah, we got Max Bultman from The Athletic joining us today. We're going to talk about the Detroit Red Wings, talk about their offseason, and about the 2025-2026 season upcoming. This week as well, we're going to have we're going to have a player come on. So that'll drop Thursday. A little programming note for Thursday as well. Thursday's show will be pre-recorded. I have to go to the hospital and get a procedure done, so that's always fun. So that's what's going to happen Thursday. Friday we're back. We got a big recording Friday with somebody. We're not going to drop it Friday. We're going to drop it next week. But I'm looking forward to it. Former NHL player, former WHL player. He's very well known in the hockey media world, so this will be a good one. Um, yeah, I'm back from Toronto. Went and spent a few days down there for daily face-off. We went to a Toronto Blue Jays game. Had a couple meetings. Went to the Hockey Hall of Fame. What a place! What a cool place to go to. That Hockey Hall of Fame is, I mean, I can't recommend it enough to any hockey fan or sports fan to go check it out. I spent probably 2 hours in there just wandering around and looking at kind of what's around there. They've got the Montreal Canadiens locker room from the '70s in there. You can go look at Ken Dryden's pads. I mean, they've got everything in there. They've got Sidney Crosby's golden goal, like the puck and the stick and the gloves that he wore in the 2010 Olympics. It's just, yeah, it's a really fun place to go to. I have to give my respects to that. And there's just so much to love, so much junior hockey stuff, so much international hockey stuff. I saw all the different IIHF jerseys as well. They've got a whole like hall of them. They got Slovenia and Hungary and Korea and all these different countries that aren't normally in the big mix of IIHF World Championships. But man, what a cool place. I think that the Hockey Hall of Fame is easily one of my favorite places I've ever been to now that I've come and gone from there. Kamloops Blazers training camp, of course, is underway. I'm going to have a story with 2026 first rounder JP Hurlburt as well. So, former American player who left the USHL, came to Kamloops. He's going to try and carve out a significant role with the team this year, and he's going to try and get himself into a first round draft scenario here, as he is I believe Stephen Ellis at Daily Faceoff had him ranked 29th in the 2026 draft. So that's good for Kamloops, good for us. First preseason games tomorrow, but I won't bore you guys with all that junior hockey talk. We got Max Bultman waiting for us backstage, so I will bring Max aboard and we will talk some Detroit Red Wings. Max, how's it going today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Let's talk a bit about Detroit's offseason. Obviously, John Gibson comes in. That's a big one. What do you make of that?
I think it, like you said, it's a big one. They've been looking for an answer in goal for quite some time, and we'll find out if John Gibson is that answer, right? Like at times in his career, he has looked like a top 10 or so goalie in the league, but it's been a while. He's still young enough that I think there's a chance that in a better environment, he can recapture some of that. But it has been 4 or 5 years since we were talking about John Gibson in that tier of goaltenders. Unfortunately for him, some prime years, right? Like we're talking age 27 to 32. That's when we see a lot of goalies have their best years. For him, it just so happened that it came in a rebuild. And I guess we'll find out if going into a team that's really trying to make the playoffs, can spark that back in him. I think he should get more workload than he got last year in Anaheim. And he is certainly one of the biggest X factors for the Red Wings season.
And then, of course, they bring in veteran James Van Riemsdyk. What do you kind of make of that one as well? Another veteran presence to add to the locker room. Is that really all that is?
I don't think it's all that is. I think, that's always a good thing, but I think they see James Van Riemsdyk as a guy who can score goals and particularly score goals in a way that they struggle to do, right? Like they have some
Mhm.
shooters. They have some guys who can score offense on the power play. One of the best power plays in the NHL last season. They lack, I guess, what I've been referring to as hard offense, the kind of offense that you really only score right at the goal mouth. And that's not just tipping pucks on the power play, although obviously James Van Riemsdyk has shown us he can do that. It's at 5-on-5. It's cleaning up rebounds. It's getting into traffic and being in that home plate area as much as you can. Time and time again, James Van Riemsdyk has proven he's really effective in those areas, and it's not just because he's big. There's a level of touch there that is hard earned, and I think when they signed James Van Riemsdyk, that was the first thing I thought of was, okay, they're looking for some hard offense here.
Yeah, absolutely. A guy that I think can, yeah, big tipper, obviously, as you kind of alluded to, net front presence, but a guy that, like you said, can score those kind of greasy goals and do the work that Detroit kind of needs. On the back end, Jacob Bernard Docker comes in. He's been a guy I've liked since the University of North Dakota, but just hasn't really seemed to find a role in Ottawa or Buffalo. What do you make of the addition there?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. He's probably the high upside, other than Gibson, the high upside addition of the summer, and you got him for such a low price. You know, a lot of the guys they got, I think you know what you're getting, and you know what you're getting in James Van Riemsdyk. You know what you're getting in Mason Appleton. It's possible that Jacob Bernard Docker spends a lot of the year as the sixth or seventh defenseman for the Red Wings, right? But I think there's at least a chance that to what you said, the pedigree, the former first round pick, what he looked like at North Dakota, you're hoping that he's a guy that, hey, maybe he's at the right moment in his career to take a leap. And they've experienced that before. They brought in Jake Wallman at just the right moment, and they completely bungled it on the way out and didn't get really to reap as much of the rewards as you hope to when you have that kind of situation. But I think you're hoping that at kind of a similar point in the career, maybe Jacob Bernard Docker can turn into a guy that you're willing to give 18, 19 good minutes to a night and kind of discovers some of the, and maybe not discovers, he has shown them in flashes before who can kind of consistently tap into his talent.
And you touched on Mason Appleton. That's another third line guy, another guy that plays the penalty kill. Obviously reunites with Andrew Kopp. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think another kind of player who maybe Detroit fans aren't, talking about all that much because he's not going to solve, the 5-on-5 offense problems in a huge way. But I think he gives them more paths to a true checking line, which is something that at times the Red Wings have had in the last couple of years, and at times they have lacked. And it could be with Andrew Kopp, it could be Mason Appleton, Andrew Kopp, and Michael Rasmussen, or Andrew Kopp could be playing up the lineup as a wing. He's looked good with some of their skill guys when they've given him that opportunity. In past seasons, particularly this last year with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat. Maybe it's a JT Compher in there in between, but I feel pretty confident. Like there's a lot of permutations of what the Red Wings lineup could look like this year. One I feel really confident about is Mason Appleton at third line right wing, and I think that's actually a good thing. It may not be the splashiest thing, it may not be the thing you notice night to night, but I think when you're creating those matchups, when Todd McClellan is figuring out how am I going to slow down the other team's top players, I think oftentimes Mason Appleton is going to be a part of that answer.
Absolutely. And Max, like with these additions, what is the kind of realistic expectation out of this team? Is playoffs contending? Is that a possibility here?
Yeah, I mean they've been they were on right on the doorstep 2 years ago, right? Came as close as
Yeah.
you can get to the playoffs without getting missing out on the tiebreaker. And then last year it was such a strange year. They were really, really bad through Christmas, and then Todd McClellan comes in and they're really, really good, and you're like, okay, they are going to make this after all. And then they go in the tank in March, pretty much right when they get back from the Four Nations break, and blow all their hope. They make a little push toward the end, but it's not enough. They're a hard team to know what to make of. I expect them to be somewhere right in that same mix where going into the year, they're one of 5 or 6 teams, I think, that's competing for the 2 wildcard spots in the East. I don't know that I'm picking them to get one of them, but I think what you saw under McClellan in the second half of last year, you at least have to give them a puncher's chance at it, because things did improve, and they did have some breakthroughs that could and maybe should be sustainable in what you saw out of Marco Casper, out of Albert Johansson. You hope that Elmer Soderblom's ready to take another step, and frankly, that those other two that I just mentioned are ready to take another step. And you never know, but I think a lot of it's going to come down to the goaltending and John Gibson. That's an area where they've had stretches of really good, stretches of really bad. I think if you could just get a season-long consistency of pretty good, that would be a big difference maker to avoiding some of the real highs and lows that they've dealt with the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of players like you just mentioned, do you have a breakout candidate for this season?
That's a great question. Boy, because I don't even know if I can pick someone like Casper because I think the breakout happened really over 42 games to close the season. Really, from mid-January on, he became one of their most
Right.
integral players. Um, Johansson has a chance at it, and I think if he gets a second pair role, there's definitely a chance for it. I'm actually going to go with a guy who hasn't played in the NHL yet, though, and I think Nate Danielson is going to play 60 plus games for this Red Wings team this year, and finish the season with people feeling similar to how they feel about Marco Casper after last season. Because I think Casper's a guy who looked like he should have made the team on opening night. He's up within 4 or 5 games. And then he becomes a really important player for them over the course of the year. And I don't see any reason why Nate Danielson can't follow a really, really similar arc to Marco Casper. So I guess I will pick a guy who's not yet on the team. I don't know if it's cheating to pick a rookie, but that's what I'll go with.
No, that's a good pick. I watched Danielson a lot when he was with Brandon and when he's with Portland as well, and just a fantastic WHL player. He had a good year with Grand Rapids, of course, too. So that's a solid pick. I like that one. Marco Casper, what do you kind of expect out of him this season? Like this is he like you kind of alluded to, he had a year last year. Is this a year where you can kind of see some consistency?
Yeah, I think that's what the Red Wings are hoping for. I mean, you'd love if he could have the statistical pace that he was on in the second half, which was, if you go from January 10 on, I believe it was like a 30 goal, 57 or 58 point pace. If he gives you that over a full season, I think they will make the playoffs because that is a level of second line center production from a responsible guy that they haven't had in a long time. In fact, I was looking up Casper since January 10th against what I would consider the second line center, or the second line centers on what I would consider some of the best teams in the NHL, the Florida Panthers. Like Marco Casper looked like a Sam Bennett clone statistically from January 10 on versus what Bennett did from January 10 on. He was not quite where Anthony Cirelli was in terms of the play driving, or same with like a Thomas Hurdle, but he's also not that far off some of these guys. And there's Wyatt Johnston, another guy who outscores Casper, and I think will always outscore Casper. But if you look at the play driving in some of those second line minutes, like the difference was not what you would think. And I think actually in that case, Casper actually had a slight edge on him. Now, Johnson, I'm guessing, was taking a little harder minutes, a little tougher usage. But my point that I'm making is from January 10 on last year, he was the equivalent of a good team's second line center. Now he shot like 18%. That's probably not sustainable. But I think a lot of the things that he was doing is sustainable. The two-way play, the responsibility, getting to the net and creating some high percentage looks for himself. If Marco Casper is a 25 goal, 55 point center this year, I feel really confident in what his underlying numbers are going to look like. I guess that's my prediction, and I think that's a big deal.
That's perfect. I like that. That's a good stat line for him. I think that's a good level up for him. And yeah, that's very solid. Now, I want to ask a question without it sounding stupid. Now, how is Patrick Kane? Like having a guy like him in the locker room must just be the best thing ever, right? And so what has it been like to kind of watch Patrick Kane with the Detroit Red Wings?
Well, and I can't speak what it's like for the players, except that I know when he
Totally.
arrived, like what the wow factor was of like, oh my gosh, I used to, use this guy in video games. Like he was the guy, right? For almost everyone who's coming into the NHL right now, they grew up. Patrick Kane was like one of the best players in the NHL, one of the most iconic. I can say from interviewing him, he is probably the best like star player media wise that I've ever covered, in the sense of like how thoughtful he is, how deeply he thinks about the game, and how willing he is to share that knowledge. And that's me as a reporter. I can only imagine what that's like for a teammate, for a young player like Lucas Raymond. If he's giving these insights that to me feel, wow, this is really, impressive. This is really insightful. I can only imagine what it is for someone that he's like actually invested in trying to help versus just kind of, doing what I think good leaders and good veterans do, which is handle some of the media stuff. Like he's so good in that way that I can't even imagine what it's like for a teammate.
100%. And yeah, I just wanted to ask that because like I grew up watching him. Like I'm 29 now, so I've watched like the best part of his careers, obviously. And man, it's just seeing him in Detroit is cool to me because it's just like it seems like he's loving it there. But I just wanted to know how, like from your end, from a reporter's, perspective, what it was kind of like to cover him day in and day out.
Yeah, like the best comp I have for it was my first year um, at the Athletic. I covered the Detroit Tigers, and Miguel Cabrera was on that team, right? And Miguel Cabrera is, I think, of similar stature as Patrick Kane, right? But the level of insight, the frequency that we talk to Kane, like how willing he is to always sit down and talk about anything, any topic in hockey, any player in the league, whether it's himself, whether it's a guy he played with, whether it's a guy he's only ever played against, it's just next level. Like it's I was shocked by how accessible and how willing, to talk he is for a player of his stature.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question here. I want to kind of go to you as a person and how covering the Red Wings. What does kind of a game day look like for you?
Yeah, so obviously you get up in the morning, you go down to the rink for morning skate, and you're depending on the day, that may be a full skate, and then you're kind of taking attendance, getting the lines, seeing what, okay, is there anything I need to be aware of? Anybody who's not skating, anything that looks really different? And you go into the locker room and you're trying to do two different things at once. You're trying to get anything that you might need for that night's story. So if there's something obvious that you think is going to be a storyline that you might not get to ask that player after the game, because you get a little more
Mhm.
access in the morning than you do post game. I'm trying to kind of lay the groundwork for that. And if not, then maybe you're working ahead on some things, right? If their team's going to go on the road and maybe I'm not going with them, I might ask them something for a story I have down the road. On a game day after that, I sometimes will stick around for the visiting team's practice and locker room. Other days, not. Again, kind of depends what the story needs. Go home and try to get anything in my life done that I need to get done, as well as that's usually my time to make phone calls. Anything that I can do. Sometimes it's podcast wise. I do the Athletic Hockey Show a couple days a week. So some days, if it's a Tuesday or a Wednesday or Thursday, those are often our recording days. So do that, and then usually head back down to the arena at probably 4:30, and then I'm there pregame talking to people. Part of it is just beating traffic and not making sure that I'm trying to not drive down there during rush hour. Talking to people, eat dinner, get anything else done that I need to before the game, watch the game, go down to the locker room, press conference, write my story, and then I'll usually get home sometime between 12:30 a.m. and 1 and try to get myself to sleep as fast as humanly possible because there'll be practice the next day. So, yeah, I mean, it varies based on what's in that middle section of the day from when I leave morning skate at either noon or 1, depending on if I stayed for the visiting team skate, and when I go back at 4. But yeah, I would say that that's either the time of the day I can get anything done life-wise I need, or I have to do, phone calls, podcasts, that kind of stuff. So it can, depending on the day, that can either be like a 13, 14-hour day, or it can be just
Yep.
kind of a 10-hour day broken up into two pieces.
I feel that. What's your favorite thing about being on the beat?
The people, for sure. I mean, it's you get
Yeah.
to know a lot of people that are really fun to be around, have, obviously very similar interests to you, whether it's your coworkers, your competitors, people who are just kind of around the team, even the players and coaches themselves. It's that's why I wanted to be a reporter, is I'm a very curious person. I like talking to people, and I love having an excuse to ask the questions that I ask to my TV when I watch other sports, right? Like, you see the Lions hat, right? Like when I watch a football
Yep.
game, I would love to ask a player like, "Hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that?" And so in hockey, I actually get that opportunity to ask those questions, and I hope the fans feel like I ask the ones they want me to ask, because that's always my goal. Is I know what it's like to follow a team and have a question that you don't know the answer to that you really want the answer to, and so most of it's trying to anticipate what that is for my readers and audience.
It's about having passion for your sport and for your team too, right? I find sometimes there's reporters who just like they're not maybe from the area, so they didn't really grow up too much of a fan of the team, and they're just doing it for a job. When some reporters are doing it because they absolutely love it. I've noticed that a little bit in hockey. But
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line because you can't, in my opinion, like I couldn't cover a team that I was a fan of. I couldn't cover the Lions, right? Or if I did, I would
yeah,
have to stop being a fan of the Lions, which would be difficult for
yes,
me, and I probably wouldn't want to do it. But like, when I was a kid, obviously, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yeah, I was a Red Wings fan growing up, but I think to do the job at the level that your readers kind of really want and deserve to an extent, like you have to be able to divorce those things. So I agree, you got to be passionate about the sport, because if you're not interested in it and curious about it, I think it shows in the work, right? Like I think if you're not
mhm,
actually interested in what you're talking about, the read becomes a snooze. But I do think you have to find a way to separate any fandoms you had when you were a kid from what your job is now, because if you go in there like a fan, in my opinion, and no despair, I know there are kind of content creators who are moving into the reporting space and maintain their fandom, and I am in some ways impressed by that. But for me, the way my process works, like I want to be as obviously around the team and interested and curious, but I don't ever want to cross that line into. I don't think I could do the job if it crossed the line into fandom. So it's a fine line to walk, where I do agree there's an inherent passion to doing good work, but I think you have to be more passionate about the stories and the work you're doing than you are about kind of the team itself, if that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely, it does. And like speaking of players and the team and stuff, is there a player or a coach that you've had to interview where you were kind of shocked by them, like just in a good way?
Hmm. Um, Early in my career, I covered a couple guys who were on teams I grew up a fan of, right? Like Henrik Zetterberg and Nicholas
Oh yeah,
Kronwall were, you know, right when I was 10, 11, my most impressionable, years as a kid. Like Nicholas Kronwall, I actually had a cool experience with when I was I don't know how old I would have been, 9 or 10 or 11 in Grand Rapids. And he played for the Griffins. And I got to play bubble hockey against him at the Great Skate, which is an event they do in Grand Rapids for kids right around the holidays. And I thought that was really cool. So growing up, I always had a picture of, elementary school me with Nicholas Kronwall on my shelf. So then like you get to the NHL as a beat writer and you're covering Nicholas Kronwall, the first couple times that was like, wow, this is really wild. And then over time, it just becomes a person and a person you're covering. And I never knew Nicholas Kronwall
yeah,
well, right? I covered him for 1 year at the end of his career. But over the course of the season, it just becomes one of the players you need to interview about the team. And that's kind of what I mean is you have to separate um, what you grew up with and some of those things that I don't want to erase my childhood memories or anything like that, but it's just
no.
you have to normalize it and let it become a professional thing, because I think that's the best way to get the best results.
Other than the people, have you had like a favorite moment though?
Mm. I always love firsts. I remember Moritz Seider's first career goal in Buffalo was really cool. It's whatever gets energy going in the locker
Yep.
rooms that you're walking into, right? Or in the buildings that you're in. I mean, their playoff push in 2023, there was a game where Lucas Raymond scored like a game tying goal with, I don't know, 20 seconds left. And then he scored the overtime winner. And the atmosphere in Little Caesars Arena that night was, I've covered losing seasons exclusively, basically. And that energy when they really had a chance to make the playoffs with 2 games left or 1 game left, I think at that point, was unlike anything I've ever covered. So that certainly would qualify. Dylan Larkin had an overtime goal in Toronto at a game I covered. And I remember being in that visiting locker room feeling like, oh, this is like what this feels like. I've never covered a playoff game in any sport ever. So like those are
Mhm.
the closest things that I can identify. Like you can kind of feel the adrenaline and the emotion of the players you're covering. Like that comes through, I think, in the work we do. So those are the moments that I guess would come to mind for me. It's just the ones where I think I felt most like I was, covering something that really mattered to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, do you feel Steve Yzerman has done enough with this team? I know we're kind of just rapidly switching from that topic to that, but just you mentioned the losing and just kind of how that
Yeah.
was going on, and it made me think about just how the Yzer plan has been going.
Yeah. It's hard to say, right? Like what is enough? No, I don't think they're in a good enough spot. I don't think that like
Yeah.
um the state of the team is gonna end up in a Stanley Cup if you just, hit fast forward on it. I don't think that. So I guess the answer to that would be no. But I also don't think that this is some like Yzerman has failed the team miserably kind of way, right? Like I think there have been a few instances where they made decisions that could have them ahead of where they are, but I don't think they're decisions that would have made them, the Dallas Stars or the Colorado Avalanche or something like that. So, they have picked in the top 5 one time under Yzerman, and I don't think that's
Mhm.
his fault, right? And that's not to say excuse him from everything that the team couldn't be better or shouldn't be better or shouldn't have made the playoffs by now, 6 years in. I think they should have, but they also were a tiebreaker away from having done it. So it's an answer that I'm sure is going to piss off everybody because I'm not being, super harsh and saying that, he's time's run out, he's on the hot seat. And I'm also not saying that this is 4D chess and everyone will see someday. I just think that they're a team that's done the most important thing well, and that's drafting in the first round. And they haven't done well enough at getting a big find outside the first round or in free agency or via trade. And um, I that's all part of being a general manager. They have improved from where they were when he got here, and they are not, in my opinion, on a Stanley Cup trajectory right now. So I guess my
Mhm.
answer is somewhere in between.
That's a respectable answer. We have a question from the chat from Randy Workman. He wants to know who will be the backup for the Wings this season.
In goal, that I think that would be Cam Talbot. So John Gibson, your number one. Cam Talbot played kind of as their number one last year. I think, especially as he
Yeah.
gets up there in years into his late 30s, that's going to be good for him if he can play more like 30 to 35 games. I think you'll get the best version of Cam Talbot in that kind of workload.
What do you think of Sebastian Cossa and what they're kind of doing with him?
I don't think it's really any different than how most teams handle young goalies. It's interesting to me how that
Mhm.
narrative goes. Like Yaroslav Askarov a year ago was in the same spot and he demanded a trade. Sebastian Cossa hasn't, demanded a trade, and probably because he isn't behind Yusei Saros like Askarov was. But Askarov demands a trade. He leaves and he plays what 10 to 13 games last year. Like I don't think
Yeah.
it would shock me if Sebastian Cossa plays 10 games this year. Maybe it's slightly less. Maybe it's 6. Maybe it's 7. But I watched Sebastian Costa in the first half last year and thought he's really close. And then lo and behold, he makes his debut. And then down the stretch in Grand Rapids, he was not good. And I don't think the Red Wings could have gone into this season planning on him to be one of their 2 goalies. I think the way he's positioned to get a lot of games in Grand Rapids, those final polishing reps in Grand Rapids. And then I think at some point this year, you'll see him play again 6 to 10 to 12 games. And then next year, I think he's in the NHL full time. So it doesn't strike me as unusual, but I know it does a lot of people. So maybe I'm the weird one. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't say that. That was a good breakdown of it. I think the comparison to Askarov was perfect because that's a good way to look at it. And like Wallstead as well, another goalie who's kind of been in the AHL, Dylan Garand out of the New York Rangers, another top end goalie there too. Like there's a few
Evan
goalies who
Levi.
are exactly Devin Levi. Like there's more goalies like that, but yeah, it just seems to be a narrative around Kosa for sure. Max, you've been very generous with your time with me, but I got one more question for you. What is your favorite Detroit Red Wings jersey?
I think their Winter Classic jersey, when they played at the Big House, was really cool. I think it really strode the line well of being different enough from what they usually wear, but also really true to an iconic logo and kind of had the historic feel. So I think that's the best jersey they've done. I'm trying to think if there's any other serious contenders. I know there's a lot of people who like the barber pole stuff, but I think
Mhm.
the 2014, I believe, was the year Winter Classic was their best jersey.
I would agree with that as well. That was a classic one. Max, thanks so much for joining me today. Seriously, it was a pleasure to talk with you.
Hey, my pleasure, Colton. Thanks so much and take care.
Yeah, you too. That was Max Bultman from The Athletic. That was awesome. Got to chat with him about the Detroit Red Wings. So that was good. We learned a little bit more about them. We've got a few more teams to go through and then we're completed all 32 teams. So few more reporters coming on over the next couple of weeks here as we kind of wind down our 32 team predictions. But with that, of course, he was wearing the Detroit Lions hat. That was nice. NFL's back. And with that, DraftKings. Game on. Week 1 starts now, and every touchdown brings you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This isn't just the NFL. It's first touchdown fireworks, anytime TD rushes, and live bets that ride every momentum shift. At DraftKings, every play is your next shot to win. This week on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, you can find lines like the Kansas City Chiefs at -170 to beat the Los Angeles Chargers, the Jacksonville Jaguars at -180 to beat the Carolina Panthers, and Travis Hunter at +175 for an anytime touchdown. Lines and odds are subject to change. This one's for you, new customers. You can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, grab over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Your season starts now. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to get $300 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first bet of $5 or more. Plus, over $200 off NFL Sunday Tickets from YouTube and YouTube TV in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, fees may apply in Illinois. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. NFL Sunday Ticket offer for new subscribers only and auto renews until canceled. Digital games and commercial use excluded. Restrictions apply. Additional NFL Sunday Ticket terms at youtube.com/go/NFL Sunday Ticket/terms. Limited time offer.
Well, that was DraftKings. Big shout out to them for sponsoring us for the season. Looking forward to doing some NHL stuff with them and talking to you guys about what you can bet towards the NHL. Tomorrow we'll have another show. Not 100% sure who the guest is going to be yet, but we do have a recording tomorrow with a 2026 top prospect. So looking forward to that. You guys can take your guesses in the comments, of who that might be. But tomorrow we are back here at 11 o'clock Eastern, or 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern, right here on GDT Live.
What's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning into another video over here on the Game Day Tarps podcast and the Hockey Podcast Network. We've got so much more where this came from, so smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell, turn the notifications on so you never miss a beat. For myself and the rest of the guys over at Game Day Tarps, we thank you, and we'll see you next time.